Hello and welcome to week 4 of Guiding the Behavior of Children. I am thoroughly enjoying getting to know each one of you through your discussion boards, and I have to tell you how impressed I was with the resources that you found last week concerning inclusion. The resources that you all found were amazing, and I always find it amusing that a lot of times we find some of the same resources, and it's because they're so wonderful. So I hope that you took the time to read through the discussion boards. And if nothing else, you saved the resources that your classmates found because they really were tremendous. I know that I saved all of them that I'm going to use for future classes. So thank you for giving me some great resources to have on inclusion. But kind of wrapping up just that particular part of the discussion on inclusion, I hope that through these resources you found how important inclusion is and how important it is that it's done right. We know that a lot of times people throw out the word inclusion, but they're not using it in the right context. Inclusion is supposed to benefit everyone that's involved, the children who have difficulties and the children who do not. And so hopefully these resources showed you that there is definitely a right way to do inclusion, making sure that every single child that we are working with has the exact same opportunities to succeed. And really, it's so amazing to see how the children who do not have difficulties benefit when they do have children with difficulties in their classroom. If nothing else, it teaches them compassion and empathy, and we all know that we need way more of that in the world, anyways. Children have a tremendous capacity for empathy and compassion, and so why not start them early? Help them learn to look at what we have in common instead of what we have that's different. So really take the information from those resources to heart and begin to look at inclusion as something that really is meant to be beneficial for all children and all of the adults who are involved as well. So this week we're going to move on to one of my favorite chapters, which is chapter 4, which is dealing with indirect guidance techniques. So the next 2 weeks you're going to find that we're going to look at techniques, the first being chapter 4, which is indirect techniques, and then the next chapter is going to be direct techniques. And those are the ones that most of us have thought that that's what the majority of this class was going to be about. But chapter 4 is probably just as important as chapter 5 because what we're going to learn from this chapter is that things that we do as teachers ahead of time are going to have an impact on how children behave. So, for instance, one of the main things that they talk about in this chapter is the importance of a developmentally appropriate schedule. So, we should understand that when we are creating a schedule, we want to make sure that we're not setting children up for times where they could have potential behavior problems or meltdowns. So we don't want to keep children active right up until the time that they are supposed to take a nap, because then it's going to be hard for them to be able to settle down, which then leads to the teacher becoming frustrated when a child isn't ready to go and take their nap. Same thing happens when we're trying to get them ready for lunch. You don't want to do anything in your schedule that's going to really cause children to have behavior problems. So that's one of the main things that we want to think about when we're setting up our classroom is, do we have a schedule that's going to allow children to alternate between quiet and active times? Are we making sure that at the times that we're expecting children to maybe be less active, are we making sure that our schedule allows them that time to wind down? And so that's why you're going to find this chapter is called indirect, because we're not actually controlling children through a particular behavior management technique, such as redirection, which is something that's talked about in chapter 5, but instead we're indirectly impacting how children behave because we're making sure that what we are doing as teachers is going to provide opportunities for children to behave the way we want them to. The other thing that I think is so fascinating and interesting is how important the way our classroom is arranged is going to impact children's behavior. So we know that if we put a group of young children into a very small space, it's potentially going to lead to some behavior problems. Children don't always like to be crammed in a little space, and it may lead to some pushing and shoving. So as teachers, we need to make sure that our classroom is set up so that we are being proactive with their behavior as opposed to being reactive. So some really simple things to think about. Are there clear walkways so that children know exactly how they're supposed to get to places? Do they know how to get to the door? Do they know how to get to the bathroom? Are they able to get to centers without having to walk through another center, which is going to absolutely cause a problem. Same thing for things like where your center's located in the classroom. If you are going to put dramatic play right next to the quiet center, that's going to cause a problem because children are who are trying to read or be quiet are going to be distracted by by children who are trying to be active in the dramatic play center. So those kinds of things are things that I want you to think through as you're reading this chapter. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to think about how would you set up your classroom? What are some elements that you would have in your classroom that would promote positive classroom behavior? So I want to show you what I have in Blackboard for you this week. So when you go to our supportive physical environments, the indirect guidance content folder, you're going to find, here's the PowerPoint for chapter 4. Here's your assignments for this week. Make sure that you submit your inclusion assignment by the end of this week, and I'll show you how to do that and just a few reminders once I go over the discussion board. So what I want you to do this week for your attendance and participation is I want you to think about your classroom. So if you're not in a classroom yet, this is your chance to go ahead and dream up your perfect classroom. If you are in a classroom, maybe this is a chance for you to reevaluate what you have in your classroom, how you have it set up, how you actually run your classroom. So here's what I want you to do. I want you first to think about the question of what elements would be in your classroom that would promote positive behavior. And again, those are things that are mentioned in the textbook, but things like clear walkways, labeling, things that are going to prevent children from having maybe a behavior issue and instead is going to promote positive. Where would things be located in your classroom? Why do you have those there? How do they help promote positive behavior guidance? So you do not have to include an actual layout of your classroom. If it's something, if you're really artistic, if there's a computer program that lets you create this fantastic layout, go for it. But that's not absolutely required. Really, what I'm looking for in your discussion board posting is the information that lets me know that you understand how important it is to have the developmentally appropriate schedule, to have the classroom that is arranged so that you're setting children up for success instead of for failure. And that's the whole thing about this chapter is that this is about us as teachers being successful because before children ever come to us, we've already had to arrange our classroom. We've already had to decide what materials are going to be in our classroom. So this really is a reflection on us. And children are going to let us know whether we're successful in the way that we do this, which is why as teachers, we have to be completely flexible. Let's say that you thought that your classroom was absolutely perfect the way it was, but yet by the end of the first week, you've noticed that there are always children fighting in the block center. And maybe it's because there's not enough room in the block center. So you have to be willing to make those changes. That's why it's the indirect guidance. We're not actually going to a child and trying to help them make good choices. Instead, we're setting it up ahead of time so that they are making those good choices. And so that really is what I want you to focus on the discussion board. So that is the only thing you have to do for your attendance and participation this week, is to make sure you fully answer this question and respond to your two classmates. And again, your inclusion part one, I told you part two is going to be a discussion board in a couple of weeks, but the actual assignment for the inclusion is due by the end of this week. So there's several ways that you can get this information to me. It goes, both of these ways go directly into the grade book. So you can go here where once you click on the title, it's going to show you that there's a place where you can browse your computer to save and upload your assignment. So all you have to do is click Browse My Computer, click on the file, and then click Submit. The exact same link is found in the assignments link, and so you will be able to go, and it's exactly the same thing. So if you don't see it one place, it's in the other place. The other thing I just wanted to remind you of is the tasks button. And so this is here so that you can always keep a running tab of when things are due. So if you ever have a question about when something's due, you can always go to that tasks button and it will show you the assignment and when it's actually due. So I think that is it for this week. I hope you enjoy reading this chapter. It's not a hard chapter, it's not a heavy chapter, but it is an important chapter. So enjoy reading about indirect guidance techniques. And I will see you in week 5 when we hit the halfway point of our semester. Have a fantastic week.